You're lying in bed at night, eyes open, and your mind won't stop. But it's not your own life keeping you awake. It's someone else's. Their problems, their choices, their disappointment, that look they gave you, that thing they said. And somewhere between replaying the conversation for the 5th time and imagining how you could have fixed it, you realize something uncomfortable. You've spent the entire day carrying weight that was never yours to carry. And the worst part, it feels normal. You've done this for so long, worrying about other people's reactions, managing their emotions, trying to hold everything together for everyone around you, that you forgot what it feels like to simply focus on yourself. Not in a selfish way, not in a cold, detached, I don't care about anyone way, but in the way a tree grows, quietly, inward, rooted in its own soil. If that hits something in you right now, stay here. Because Carl Jung, one of the deepest psychological minds to ever live, had a lot to say about this. About why some people are wired to absorb the world around them. About why letting go feels almost impossible, even when you know it's destroying your peace. And about why the most radical, most misunderstood act of healing you will ever undertake is the simple, terrifying decision to finally turn your attention back to yourself. Today I'm going to walk you through what Jung really meant when he said that your first responsibility is to your own soul, and why everything in your life begins to shift the moment you stop abandoning yourself for the sake of others. And before we begin, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below. Have you ever caught yourself carrying someone else's emotional weight? I want to hear your story. Have you noticed how easily other people's moods get inside you? A friend calls, upset about something. You listen, you comfort them, you hang up, and then you realize their heaviness is sitting in your chest now. It followed you into the kitchen. It's there while you eat dinner. It's still there when you try to sleep. Or maybe it's subtler than that. You walk into a room and immediately sense the tension. Nobody said anything. Nobody had to. But your whole body shifted. Your breathing changed. Your thoughts rearranged themselves around someone else's unspoken problem. Jung had a name for what is happening here. He called it psychic contamination, the unconscious absorption of another person's emotional state. And he believes some people are far more susceptible to it than others, not because they are weak, but because their unconscious is wide open. They feel what others feel almost automatically, like a radio that picks up every frequency in the room. Here is what most people miss. This is not empathy. Empathy is a choice. Empathy says, I see your pain and I care. Psychic contamination is involuntary. It says, your pain is now my pain, and I don't know how to put it down. And when this becomes your default way of moving through the world, something devastating happens. You lose track of which feelings are actually yours. Think about that for a moment. How many of your anxieties right now truly belong to you? How much of the heaviness you carry started in someone else's story? Jung understood that the unconscious does not respect boundaries the way the conscious mind does. It absorbs, it mirrors, it entangles. And if you have spent years unconsciously merging with the emotional states of the people around you, then you haven't just been helping them, you've been slowly disappearing. That is why Jung said the first act of psychological maturity is learning to distinguish what is yours from what is not. Not to stop caring, not to become indifferent, but to finally ask the question you've been avoiding. Where do I end and where does the other person begin? And this question, as simple as it sounds, can change everything. Now let's go deeper, because the pattern of losing yourself in others doesn't happen by accident. There is a structure underneath it, and Jung mapped it with extraordinary precision. He called it the persona, the mask, The version of you that learned very early how to read a room, how to adjust, how to become whatever the situation required. You learned to smile when you were sad, to say yes when everything inside you screamed no, to shrink your needs so others could expand into the space you vacated. And here is the painful truth. At some point you got so good at this that you forgot it was a performance. The mask fused to your face. You stopped being able to tell the difference between what you genuinely wanted and what you had trained yourself to want in order to keep the peace. Jung said, the persona is a compromise between the individual and society. It is necessary. We all need some version of a social self, but the danger comes when you begin to believe the mask is you, when your entire identity becomes organized around other people's comfort. Think about your daily life. How often do you check in with yourself before responding to someone? Or do you just react, automatically adjusting to what they seem to need? How often do you ask yourself what you actually feel versus what you think you should feel? For many people, especially those who grew up in environments where emotional caretaking was expected of them, the persona isn't just a social tool, it is a survival strategy. You learn that love was conditional, that acceptance had a price, that the safest way to exist was to make yourself useful, agreeable, invisible. And so you focused outward, always outward, reading faces, anticipating needs, managing other people's emotions before they even knew they had them. Meanwhile, somewhere deep beneath the surface, the real you was quietly starving. Jung would say, this is one of the greatest tragedies of the human psyche. Not that we wear masks, but that we forget we're wearing them. And the moment you begin to sense that discomfort, that gnawing feeling that something is off, that you're tired of performing, that you've been giving pieces of yourself away and getting nothing back, that is not a breakdown. That is the mask beginning to crack. And what's underneath it has been waiting for you for a very long time. So what happens when you finally stop? When you pull your attention back from the world and turn it inward? For most people, the first thing that rises is not peace, it is fear. Because underneath all that outward focus, underneath the caretaking and the people-pleasing and the constant monitoring of everyone else's emotional weather, there is something you have been avoiding. Jung called it the shadow. And the shadow is everything about yourself that you pushed into the dark. Not because it was evil, but because at some point you decided it wasn't acceptable. Maybe it's your anger, the part of you that wants to say, enough, I'm done carrying this. Maybe it's your ambition, the part that wants something for yourself and feels guilty even thinking about it. Maybe it's grief, old and unprocessed, sitting in a room inside you that you locked the door on years ago. The shadow holds all of it. And here's the part that changes everything. Focusing on other people is one of the most effective ways to avoid your own shadow. As long as you are consumed by someone else's crisis, you never have to face your own. As long as you are fixing their life, you never have to look at what is broken in yours. Jung said, until you make the unconscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And for many people, that fate looks like this. A life spent in service to everyone else, a constant feeling of depletion, relationships where you give everything and receive almost nothing, and underneath it all, a quiet, persistent emptiness that no amount of helping others can fill. That emptiness is not a sign that you are not doing enough for the world. It is a sign that you have not yet done the most important work of all, the work of turning inward and meeting yourself, the whole self, shadow and all. And this is where it gets beautiful, because when you begin to face what you've been running from, something extraordinary starts to happen. You stop needing other people's approval to feel whole. You stop measuring your worth by how useful you are. You begin to discover parts of yourself that have been buried for years, not just the pain, but the creativity, the desire, the power, the joy that got pushed down alongside everything else. Jung called this process individuation, and he considered it the single most important task of a human life. Individuation is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming complete. It is the process of integrating all the scattered, hidden, rejected parts of yourself into a unified whole, the light and the dark, the acceptable and the unacceptable, the mask and the unacceptable, the mask and the face beneath it. And here is what Jung understood that most people never grasp. You cannot individuate while your energy is poured into everyone else. The process demands your full attention. Not forever, not in permanent isolation, but there are seasons of life where your soul requires you to withdraw, to stop managing the world, to sit in the uncomfortable silence and finally listen to what your own depths are trying to tell you. This is not selfishness. This is the opposite of selfishness. Because a person who has never faced themselves, who has never done the inner work, who has never stopped long enough to meet their own shadow, that person doesn't truly help others. They rescue, they fix, they enable, they perform generosity while secretly drowning, and everyone can feel it. The help they give carries a hidden cost, because it comes from a well that has run dry. But a person who has done the work, a person who has sat with their own darkness and come through the other side, they give from overflow, not obligation. Their presence is steady, not anxious. Their love doesn't come with invisible strings because they are not trying to earn their own worth through someone else's gratitude. Jung said, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. And he was right. It is terrifying because it means you can no longer hide behind the needs of others. You can no longer distract yourself with their dramas. You have to sit in your own room with your own thoughts, with your own unresolved everything, and stay. But that room, the one you've been avoiding, that is where your life actually begins. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you made a decision based entirely on what you needed? Not what someone expected, not what would cause the least conflict, not what would make you look good or keep the peace, just what you, at the deepest level, actually needed. If you can't remember, that tells you something important. It tells you that somewhere along the way your inner compass got hijacked, and it didn't happen all at once. It happened in 1,000 small moments. The time you swallowed your opinion to avoid a fight. The time you said yes to something that made you feel sick inside. The time you abandoned your own plans because someone else's emergency took priority. Again, Jung wrote extensively about what he called the self, and he was very careful to distinguish it from the ego. The ego is the conscious you, the one who manages your day, makes your lists, responds to texts. But the self is something larger. It is the totality of your being, conscious and unconscious, known and unknown. It is the blueprint of who you are meant to become. And the self speaks, not in loud, obvious ways. It speaks in feelings, in dreams, in strange impulses, in that quiet knowing that surfaces when everything else gets still. It's the voice that says, this relationship is draining you. The voice that says, you've been ignoring your own needs for too long. The voice that says, something in your life needs to change and you already know what it is. But here is the problem. That voice gets drowned out when all your energy is directed outward. When you are constantly tending to other people's gardens, you cannot hear the seeds trying to break ground in your own soil. And over time, the self doesn't stop speaking, but you stop listening. And when you stop listening to the self, Jung said, it starts to speak through symptoms, through exhaustion, through resentment, through that hollow feeling at 2 a.m. when the house is quiet and you suddenly realize you don't know who you are anymore without someone else's problem to solve. That realization is not something to be afraid of. It is the self calling you home. So what does it actually look like to focus only on yourself? Not as an idea, but as a lived practice? Because this is where many people get stuck. They understand the concept, they feel the truth of it, but the moment they try to put it into action, the guilt arrives like clockwork. You start to set a boundary, and a voice inside says, you're being selfish. You decide to say no to a favor, and immediately imagine the other person's disappointment. You take an evening for yourself and spend half of it wondering if someone is upset with you for not being available. This guilt is not evidence that you are doing something wrong. It is evidence that you are doing something new. And the unconscious resists what is new because the unconscious wants to keep you safe. And safe, for your unconscious, means familiar. Even if familiar is exhausting, even if familiar is self-abandonment. Jung understood this resistance deeply. He knew that the path inward is not gentle, at least not at first. It requires you to tolerate discomfort, to sit with the guilt and not obey it, to watch the old patterns arise and choose differently anyway. It looks like this. You wake up, and before you check your phone, before you scan for other people's needs, you ask yourself one question: what do I need today? Not what do I owe, not what is expected. What do I need? It looks like saying, I love you, but I can't carry that for you right now, and meaning it, and not apologizing for it 3 times afterward. It looks like sitting in a quiet room and doing nothing productive, just being, letting whatever needs to surface rise without judgment. Maybe it's sadness, maybe it's anger, maybe it's a dream you buried 10 years ago that suddenly feels alive again. It looks like making choices that don't make sense to other people, but make perfect sense to your soul. And slowly, something begins to shift. The constant noise in your mind gets quieter. Not because the world got less demanding, but because you stop volunteering to carry all of it. You start to feel your own edges again, where you end, where others begin. Your energy returns, your clarity sharpens, and for the first time in a long time, you feel like you are actually living your life instead of performing in someone else's. And the people around you will notice. Some will adjust. They will respect your space and even admire your honesty. But others will resist. They will call you distant. They will say you've changed. They will try to pull you back into the old dynamic because your transformation threatens their comfort. Jung knew this. He wrote that the process of becoming yourself is often met with opposition, not just from within, but from the world. People are invested in your old patterns. Your compliance kept things running. Your selflessness kept them comfortable. And when you stop, the system shakes. But here is what Jung also knew. The people who are truly meant to walk beside you will not be threatened by your wholeness. They will be drawn to it. Because a person who knows themselves, who has done the inner work, who gives from fullness instead of emptiness, that person is magnetic, not because they perform generosity, but because they embody it. The real ones will stay. And the connections that remain will be deeper, more honest, more nourishing than anything you had before. Because for the first time, you won't be showing up as a mask. You'll be showing up as yourself. Perhaps right now, sitting here, something in you feels both heavy and light at the same time. Heavy because you recognize how long you've been living this way. Light because something has finally been named. And naming is the beginning of freedom. Jung spent his life studying the depths of the human psyche, and one truth runs through all of his work like an underground river. You cannot give to the world what you have not first given to yourself. You cannot love others fully if you do not know your own heart. You cannot hold space for someone else's healing if your own wounds are still bleeding beneath the surface. Focusing on yourself is not the end of your connection to others. It is the beginning of real connection. The kind that doesn't drain you, the kind that doesn't require you to disappear, the kind where two whole people meet each other honestly instead of two empty people trying to fill each other's voids. So let the rest go, not with anger, not with resentment, but with the quiet understanding that you have spent enough of your life tending fires that were never yours to keep burning. Your fire matters too, and it has been waiting for you. If you take one thing from today, let it be this: the world will always ask for more of you. There will always be another crisis, another person who needs something, another reason to put yourself last. But your soul is not infinite in its patience. It will wait for you, yes, but it will also keep sending you signals: fatigue, emptiness, resentment, that quiet ache that won't go away until you finally listen. And listening, truly listening to yourself, is not a luxury. It is the most necessary thing you will ever do. Dune said, your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes. You've been dreaming long enough. It's time to wake up.